If you seek liberalization, come here to this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Who can forget that? President Reagan speaking those famous words at Brandenburg Gate in 1987. That moment happening 2 years before the fall of the Berlin Wall. Today marks 30 years since that barrier came down and freedom was finally let in. Right now, on the left of your screen, you're looking live at the ceremony that's happening underway in Berlin. The Chancellor Angela Merkel and others are there, as well as the Deputy Secretary of State from the United States. I'm joined now by Peggy Grande. She's a former executive assistant to President Reagan, author of The President Will See You Now, My Stories and Lessons from Ronald Reagan's Final Years. Peggy, thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me, and congratulations on the new show.
Appreciate it. Bottom line for me is, when you hear those words from President Reagan, it still kind of puts chills through you, what he said to Gorbachev.
It does. And for him, it was the culmination of a lifelong fighting of communism. Back to when he was president of the Screen Actors Guild, he was concerned about the Red Scare in Hollywood. And we certainly remember those words at the Berlin Wall. But prior to that, he was calling the Soviet Union an evil empire. He was saying that they were destined for the ash heap of history. And while that made many people nervous because they thought it was too confrontational, they were instead calling the Soviet system a giant misunderstanding. He believed it was the very foundation between good and evil and right and wrong. And aren't we glad he boldly proclaimed those words at that gate that day?
When you take a look at your book and the lessons learned from President Reagan that you learned up close working for him, what do you think we should be thinking about 30 years later?
Well, he always said that freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. It's not handed to our children in the bloodstream, but it must be fought for and defended and protected by every generation. And so I think today he would celebrate this incredible moment, but also would be mindful to remind us that it's something we need to be diligent about. We know that the world is a dangerous place. He believed in peace through strength. That was militarily. It was also economically. He also believed in strength of messaging, which he showed time and time again. He also believed in the power of optimism. He did believe that it was a Cold War that could be won, and he was hoping to win it without firing a single shot, and he did.
Yeah. And if you think about the world as we see it now, with the threats we still have from North Korea to Iran, which we were just reporting on, what do you think President Reagan would be thinking as he would survey the global stage right now?
Yeah. Well, he always believed in face-to-face diplomacy, and so he did believe that it was vital to get face-to-face with these leaders, and he believed that there was nothing that couldn't be solved if two people sat across the table from each other. And even though he believed that the Cold War would be won, I think he would be maybe a little surprised at how quickly it was won. But it was long and hard fought. He tried, first of all, to reach out to Brezhnev, and then Andropov, and then Chernenko, who all died in office before he had a chance to finally sit down with Gorbachev. And even he could probably never have imagined how that warm fire in Geneva would start to thaw the ice of the Cold War all those years ago.
In the last moment that we have, what do you think are the lessons for President Trump as he figures out the Trump doctrine? He's got a big election coming, obviously, but all of these problems around the world. What are the lessons from the Reagan doctrine that you think are important for this president?
Yeah. Well, Reagan always said the strategy is we win, they lose. But he surrounded himself with strength of allies as well. He looked to Margaret Thatcher and Pope John Paul II, who were allies in putting pressure on communism all over the world. And ultimately, he looked to the people. He believed that people, once they got a taste of freedom, they couldn't help but want more. And so that's the real lesson. He knew capitalism and communism could not coexist side by side. And so ultimately, capitalism and freedom had to prevail.
A president who is relentlessly optimistic. Peggy Grande, you got a chance to be right at his elbow. The book is The President Will See You Now. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you, Ed.